Has this ever happened to you? A man once intoxicated by your presence now drifts away, his gaze no longer anchored to yours, his hands colder, his words thinning into the quiet. It begins subtly, like a candle's flame pulling back from the wick, a retreat so gradual you question if it's even real. Yet your intuition knows. The undercurrent shifts, and the mind, desperate for safety, invents reasons, blames timing, blames stress, blames everything but the raw and unspeakable truth. Something within him has recoiled from the mirror you became. For in love, every man unconsciously seeks not only a partner, but a reflection of his idealized self, a vision birthed in the hidden chambers of his psyche. Carl Jung called it the anima projection, the inner feminine each man carries in his unconscious. In the beginning, you wear this projection like an invisible crown. You are the heroine in his myth, the soft echo of his longing, the living embodiment of the colors he has never fully allowed himself to touch. But the crown is not truly yours. It is forged from his imagination, not from the substance of who you are. When the relationship begins, he does not see you, not entirely. He sees the dream, the cure, the missing piece that will make him whole. And you, perhaps unknowingly, accept this worship. It feels intoxicating, even empowering, to be so completely desired. Yet there is a shadow here. For the moment you begin to reveal your depths, the complexity, the unpolished truths, the sovereignty that will not bend to his fantasy, the dream fractures. And what replaces it is not neutrality, but withdrawal. He stops loving, or so. It appears not because you became less, but because you became more real. The fragile scaffolding of his projection cannot bear the weight of your reality. To truly love you would require him to meet his own shadow, to face the unhealed wounds that made him cling to the fantasy in the first place. Most men, unprepared for this inner confrontation, choose instead to retreat. It is not rejection of your worth, it is rejection of his own unfinished work. You may feel the sting as if it were a personal failure, because women have been conditioned for centuries to internalize male withdrawal as a verdict on their value. But Jung's insight, paired with the hard-earned wisdom of Stoic philosophy, offers another lens. His love was never fully yours to lose, because it was never fully his to give. A man who is not individuated, who has not separated his inner vision from the living woman before him, cannot offer love without conditions. He can offer only the echo of his dream. If you observe closely, you will see the signs long before the final silence. The way his attention shifts from curiosity to comfort, from wonder to familiarity, from presence to absence. The way he becomes restless in moments of your authenticity, as if the truth of you threatens the fragile dream. Some part of you knows. This is not about beauty fading or novelty dying. It is about his inability to reconcile the goddess he imagined with the human before him. In this moment, you stand at a crossroads. One path bends you toward self-erasure, toward performing the version of you that pleases his projection. The other leads you toward a deeper solitude, where you risk his abandonment but keep your soul intact. The first path may hold him longer, but it will cost you the marrow of your being. The second may strip you bare, but it will leave you whole. The Stoics wrote that what others do is beyond your control, and that the wise person measures not the length of another's devotion, but the integrity of their own spirit. Seneca himself might whisper to you now, do not seek permanence in what was never meant to be owned. The love that withdraws at the first sign of your full humanity is not the love that will carry you into your highest becoming, yet. Here is the paradox. His withdrawal painful as it is, can be your initiation. For the wound of abandonment is also the wound that forces you to meet yourself without adornment, without the reflection of his desire. You are left only with your own. And if you are brave enough, you will see that the love you thought you lost was merely a mirror shattering. And in the shards lies the truer reflection, the woman who does not exist to complete a man's myth, but to write her own. You begin to sense that his sudden absence is not the end of your story, but the turning of a page. It is here, in the quiet after the loss, that the deeper work begins, the work of unbinding your worth from his recognition, of reclaiming the crown as your own, forged this time not from projection, but from truth. And so the silence stretches, not as an empty void, but as a crucible. In that silence, the unconscious begins to speak, not in words, but in symbols, in dreams, in the subtle changes in your body's rhythm. Jung knew that what the conscious mind calls loss, the deeper self may call initiation. His withdrawal becomes the alchemical fire in which the false layers of your identity are burned away, layer by layer, until only what is essential remains at first. Your instinct is to fill the emptiness, to explain, to chase, to ask what went wrong. This is not weakness. It is the primal impulse to close an open wound. But if you resist that impulse, something extraordinary happens. You start to see the threads that tied you to him were woven not only from love, but from the archetypal hunger for validation, the ancient feminine pattern of defining self-worth through the eyes of the masculine. And here the shadow reveals itself that you needed his love to believe in your own. The psyche does not make such revelations gently. It pulls them from you with the precision of a surgeon, even if it feels like a butcher's knife. Every memory of his affection becomes tinged with a bittersweet truth, that he loved the version of you he could understand, not the fullness of the woman you are. And the moment that fullness demanded recognition, the dream dissolved. Yet the woman who understands this, who truly sees it, gains a kind of freedom that is terrifying to those still ruled by projection. She begins to realize that his inability to hold her reality says nothing about her desirability and everything about his readiness. For what is love if not the courage to witness another as they are, stripped of the masks that first seduced us? It is here that Stoic philosophy merges with Jungian depth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. To grieve a man who could not stay is to misunderstand the nature of possession. No soul belongs to you. No heart can be owned without first being caged. And a caged heart is never worth having. If you were to see clearly, you would understand that he did not stop loving you. He stopped loving the illusion. And that is a gift, though it does not feel like one. Now, for the death of illusion is the birth of vision. This is why Jung spoke of individuation as both a death and a birth. The death of false selves. The birth of the one who can stand in her own psychic center without begging the world to orbit her. In the quiet that follows, you may feel the pull of the shadow, the temptation to make yourself smaller, softer, more palatable, so that the next man does not flee. But beware. This is the soul's greatest betrayal, for it trades truth for temporary belonging. The anima projection that once placed you on a pedestal is fragile. It will always crack when reality intrudes. Your task is not to protect the pedestal, but to step down from it willingly, to stand on solid ground where only those who can meet you eye to eye may remain. Consider this: when he pulled away, he revealed not a lack of love, but a limit to it. And in that limit lies your invitation to seek connection, not in those who are intoxicated by your light, but in those who can sit with your darkness without turning away. For the darkness is not your flaw, it is your depth. It is where your power sleeps until it is called forth. The ancient mystics knew this truth well, that the soul grows more in the absence of applause than in its presence. In the long nights, when no one is watching, when no voice affirms your worth, you learn to draw that worth from within. And once you have found it there, no man's departure can strip it from you. His absence becomes the forge. His silence becomes the teacher. And the woman who emerges is no longer the dream he once adored, but the reality he could not bear, radiant not because she was chosen, but because she chose herself. Over time, the ache changes shape. It is no longer the sharp wound of rejection, but a deep, resonant echo that hums beneath the surface of your days. This is the echo of your own shadow calling to you, the parts of yourself you once exiled in order to be loved. Jung knew that the shadow, if ignored, does not disappear, it waits. It waits for moments like this, when the outer world's validation collapses, so it can step forward and demand to be seen. And so you begin to notice her, this shadow self, in the way your body tenses when you remember his gaze, in the way your mind replays conversations, searching for the moment it all began to unravel. She is not here to torment you, though it feels like she might be. She is here to remind you of every compromise you made to remain the woman he could adore, of every truth swallowed, every instinct dulled, every quiet rebellion abandoned so you could stay in the warmth of his approval. There is a kind of violence in such self-abandonment, a slow, unbloody erosion of the soul, and yet, like so many women before you, you endured it willingly, believing that love was worth the price. But now the bill has come due, and it is higher than you imagined, for you did not just lose him, you lost the version of yourself that had lived only for him. It is here, in the ruins, that the possibility of rebirth appears, but rebirth is never clean. It requires the death of the false self, and death is rarely graceful. You will grieve her, the agreeable, accommodating woman who was always enough for him, until she wasn't. You will grieve her because she was your shield, your currency, your passport into the safety of his arms. And without her, you feel exposed, vulnerable, unarmored. This is where many turn back, retreating into new relationships, hoping to find another man to restore the old illusion. But to do so is to abandon the work, the sacred work. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole, not through the completion by another, but through the integration of the parts you have long disowned. In Stoic thought, this is the inner citadel, the unassailable fortress of the soul that no external loss can breach. Marcus Aurelius likened it to a mind fortified against fortune's cruelty. To build it, you must face what you have avoided, the truth that no man's love can serve as the foundation of your worth. The foundation must be yours, carved from bedrock, unshakable by the tremors of another's departure. When you understand this, his absence transforms from a wound into a mirror. In it, you see not only what he could not hold, but what you once refused to hold in yourself: your anger, your needs, your ambitions, your unpolished truths, all the traits that did not fit neatly into his fantasy, all the edges that made you human rather than ideal. These are not flaws, they are the raw materials of your wholeness. To reclaim them is an act of quiet rebellion against centuries of conditioning. It is to declare that your complexity is not a liability, but your birthright. that you will no longer sand yourself down to fit into a man's palm, that the woman who stands here now, grieving, fierce, unhidden, will not barter her depth for the shallow comfort of being adored. And as this reclamation takes root, you begin to notice a shift. The nights feel less empty. The silence becomes less a void and more a canvas. You start to see yourself not as abandoned, but as unbound. The cage door has swung open, not because he set you free, but because he could not contain you. One day, you will look back on this and see that his departure was not the end, but the invitation. An initiation into a kind of love that does not depend on another's staying, a kind of beauty that does not require a witness, a kind of power that does not need permission. As the days turn into weeks, the contours of your solitude sharpen. At first the quiet feels like exile, a cold expanse where laughter once lived. But slowly you begin to sense that this is not exile at all, but sacred ground. This is the threshold Jung spoke of, where the old patterns dissolve and the true self emerges, raw and unguarded. You start to see your own patterns more clearly, as if someone has drawn back a veil. The way you mistook intensity for intimacy, the way you read devotion in his eyes, without realizing it was built upon the scaffolding of fantasy. The way you silenced your instincts to preserve the dream a little longer. These are not just mistakes. They are archetypal scripts passed down through generations, the maiden offering herself to the hero's quest, believing that in serving his story she will secure her place in it. But the truth is harder. The hero's quest was never yours, and when your needs began to rise like mountains in his path, he turned away, seeking flatter ground. This is not a failure of your worth. It is the predictable collapse of a relationship built upon projection, rather than presence. Jung called this the breaking of the spell, the moment when the anima or animus is withdrawn and the lover stands face to face with the other as they truly are. For many men, this confrontation with reality is unbearable. To continue loving you as you are would demand that he confront his own shadow, the wounds, insecurities, and fears that your authenticity might stir. And so, like a man averting his gaze from a too bright light, he steps back into the safety of his illusions. And here is where the Stoics lend their steel. Epictetus wrote, "If you wish to be loved, love yourself first, not as a platitude, but as a discipline, a relentless returning to your own center, especially when another has walked away. This is the work before you now, to love the parts of yourself that were too much for him, too wild, too unyielding, too alive." You begin to realize that the ache you feel is not just for his absence, but for the version of yourself you became when he adored you. That self, lit by his desire, felt invincible. But she was not whole. She was tethered to his gaze, blooming only under the light he offered. And what is a flower that cannot bloom without a sun, but a prisoner of the seasons? In the depth of this awareness, a seed of defiance takes root. You will not live by the weather of another's affection. You will not wither because his light has shifted. You will turn inward, finding the sun within the fierce, steady radiance that no man can grant or take away. This is not the easy path. It will demand that you face your loneliness without flinching, that you build a life rich enough to hold you in its own embrace. And so you begin to tend to yourself in new ways, not as a replacement for his love, but as a declaration that your existence is not conditional. You choose rituals that honor your body, your mind, your spirit. You speak truths without dressing them for someone else's comfort. You create beauty that does not beg for applause. In doing so, you begin to attract differently, not the man who seeks a dream to inhabit, but the man who can stand beside a woman without needing to rewrite her. A man who has met his own shadow, who does not fear the depth of yours. A man who knows that love is not possession, but partnership, not escape from oneself, but a deepening into truth. And here lies the most profound paradox. When you no longer need him, when your worth no longer bends to his presence or absence, you become more magnetic than ever. Not because you seek to be, but because freedom has its own gravity. One day, without warning, you will wake and feel the shift. The wound will no longer define you. The story will no longer bind you. And you will realize that his leaving was not the great loss of your life, but the necessary clearing for your becoming. There comes a moment, often without ceremony, when the grief no longer commands the room. It lingers still, but softer now, like a ghost who has lost interest in haunting. You notice it in small ways. A song that once sliced through you now stirs only a faint ache. The scent that used to undo you now drifts by without pulling you. Under you are not forgetting him, you are reclaiming yourself. It is here that the deeper alchemy begins. Jung would say you are integrating the anima's withdrawal, reconciling the split between who you were in his eyes and who you are in truth. Where once the gap between these selves felt like a wound, now it feels like a bridge. One you are building plank by plank, not to return to him, but to cross fully into yourself. You start to understand why his love faded when you stepped out from his projection. The fantasy he loved was static, a fixed image that comforted him because it did not challenge him. But you are not static. You are alive, ever-changing, layered with contradictions. To love you is to dance with the unpredictable, to welcome the storms as well as the calm. He wanted the harbor without the waves, but you were born of oceans. This realization does not come with bitterness, but with clarity. The Stoics teach that nature does not err, it simply follows its course. His retreat was not a cosmic mistake, it was the unveiling of a truth that needed to be seen. Had he stayed, you might have continued the slow, quiet death of fitting yourself into his frame. His absence shattered that frame, and now your edges are free, and yet freedom carries its own weight. For in casting off the dream, you must now live without the constant mirror of his admiration. This is the place where many falter, reaching for the next face, the next gaze, to once again feel reflected. But reflection is not the same as recognition. To be recognized is to be seen as whole, and only you can grant yourself that. You begin to notice the hunger in you shift. Where once you craved reassurance, now you crave truth. Where once you measured your worth in how deeply you were desired, now you measure it in how fiercely you remain authentic. And though the old ache flares from time to time, it no longer rules you. It visits like weather, passing clouds in an otherwise vast sky. It is in this vastness that you encounter something unexpected, gratitude. Gratitude for the ending you once cursed, for the man who could not stay, for the dismantling of the illusion that once held you. For without it, you would not have been driven into the deep work of becoming. Without it, you might still be living in the dim, seductive comfort of being loved for a version of you that wasn't real. From here, your vision sharpens. You see the pattern not only in him, but in others. The men who approach with glowing eyes and big promises. The ones who mistake infatuation for devotion, projection for connection. You recognize it because you've lived it. And now, you are no longer willing to be anyone's mirror, if they cannot also be yours. Jung taught that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. In truth, you were transformed. But, unlike him, you did not flee from the reaction. You let it burn, let it strip you bare. Let it carve out the space for someone new to rise from the ashes. And rise you do, not as the woman he left, not as the woman who waited for him to return, but as the woman who no longer looks for herself in the eyes of the departing. The woman who understands that love worth keeping is not afraid of her shadow, her truth, or her becoming. The air feels different now, not lighter, but truer. You walk into rooms not wondering who will notice you, but knowing you are unshakable whether they do or not. And in that quiet certainty lies a power that no man's withdrawal can touch. By now, the shape of your life has changed. His absence is no longer a hollow in the center of your days, but a space you have filled with your own essence. The longing that once reached outward has turned inward, deep into the chambers of your own soul, where you are learning to speak the language of self. This is the realm where Jung's individuation becomes more than a concept. It becomes lived reality. You begin to see how the relationship was a mirror, not just of his projections, but of your own. You projected too, not the anima, but the hero archetype, the one who could shield you from loneliness, from self-doubt, from the fear of being unseen. You made him the guardian of your worth, and in doing so, handed him the power to define it. His leaving shattered that arrangement, and now the pieces lie before you, waiting for you to reclaim them. This reclamation is not a tidy process. The days you gather your power with ease, speaking your truth like fire, unafraid of how it lands. Other days you reach for the old habits, the softening of your voice, the shrinking of your needs, before catching yourself in the act. But each time you choose to stand firm in your authenticity, you strengthen a muscle that was once atrophied by dependence on his approval. It is here that Stoic philosophy becomes more than a comfort. It becomes a practice. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." His absence, once the obstacle you could not move past, has become the very path into your own sovereignty. The loss forced you into an arena where the only opponent is your own doubt, and the only victory is mastery over yourself. And mastery, you are learning, is not the elimination of pain, but the refusal to be ruled by it. The memory of him still surfaces in certain songs, certain streets, certain shades of light at dusk. But the difference now is that these memories no longer dictate your mood. They arrive, they pass, and you remain steady. This is the quiet triumph of self-possession. You also begin to notice the subtle ways the world responds to this change. People approach you differently, not because of some superficial glow, but because they sense something unshakable beneath your skin. You are no longer bending toward their approval. You are rooted in your own, and this rootedness has a gravity that draws only those who can meet you without needing to diminish you in this state. You see men with clearer eyes. You can tell who is enchanted by the fantasy of you, and who is intrigued by the reality. You no longer confuse desire with depth. You will no longer take pursuit as proof of compatibility. You have learned that the man who deserves to stand beside you is the one who will not flinch when the dream fades and the truth appears. Jung would say that you have integrated a part of your shadow, the part that once feared being too much. Now you understand that too much for the wrong man is exactly enough for the right one. And more importantly, you understand that the right one is not the prize. You are. This shift is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is knowing that love is not a transaction where you barter pieces of yourself for security. It is an exchange between equals who see each other clearly and choose to stay, not because they need to, but because they want to. And should they leave, it will not unravel you. There is a stillness in this knowledge, the kind that comes only when the storms have passed and the air is clear. You are no longer bracing for abandonment. You are no longer scanning the horizon for someone to rescue you from your own life. You have become the rescuer and the sanctuary, the one who will not walk away from herself. And in that unshakable truth lies a beauty that no sudden withdrawal can tarnish. For the love you hold now is not fragile, not conditional, not at the mercy of another's readiness. It is yours, and it is enough. The seasons turn, and with them, so do you. The woman who once measured her value by the warmth of a man's gaze now walks through the world with a different kind of gravity, one born not from being adored, but from knowing she is unshakable without it. What began as heartbreak has unfolded into something far rarer, a complete reorientation of your inner compass. You see now that his love, while intoxicating, was never a permanent refuge. It was a fleeting mirror, reflecting back only the parts of you he could admire without confronting himself. The rest, your darker truths, your hungers, your contradictions, he turned away from. And in doing so, he forced you to turn toward them. This was his unintended gift, the kind of gift that arrives wrapped in pain and only later reveals its worth. Jung wrote that no one becomes conscious without pain. It is the suffering that compels the psyche to move beyond the surface, to descend into its depths. His sudden withdrawal was the descent you did not choose but desperately needed. It ripped you from the shallow waters of conditional love and plunged you into the ocean of your own being, where the currents are fierce but the treasures are real. In those depths, you confronted the shadow, not just the pieces you had hidden from him, but the ones you had hidden from yourself. The part that feared solitude so much it would rather be half seen than fully alone. The part that believed a man's desire was the highest proof of your beauty. The part that, without his gaze, felt like it might vanish. And one by one, you gathered these fragments, not to polish them into acceptability, but to hold them as they are, raw, imperfect, alive. The Stoics would call this self-sufficiency, not in the brittle sense of needing no one, but in the deep, enduring way of depending first on your own inner resources. Epictetus taught that freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and that freedom comes from understanding that external things, even love, are not truly ours to keep. What is yours is your reason, your virtue, your capacity to remain intact. When the world shifts beneath you, you've learned that the man who cannot love you when the projection fades is simply showing you the limits of his own self-knowledge. His retreat is not proof that you were too much. It is proof that he was not yet enough, not enough for himself, and therefore not enough for you. This truth no longer stings. It simply is, like the changing of a tide, and because you no longer take his leaving as a reflection of your worth, you move differently in love. You enter slowly, with eyes open, unafraid to show the depths too soon. You are not here to be a dream. You are here to be a reality. And you know now that the man who is worthy will not confuse one for the other. The most beautiful shift of all is you have stopped searching for someone to make you feel whole. You have already met her in the quiet hours, in the loneliness you once feared, in the reflection that now greets you in the mirror with unflinching eyes. She is not the woman who waited for his return, nor the one who shrank to keep him close. She is the one who walked through the fire of his absence and emerged carrying her own light. Jung would call this integration, the union of shadow and self into something indivisible. The Stoics would call it virtue, the alignment of your life with your highest values, regardless of circumstance. You might simply call it peace, and in this peace, you understand the final truth. Love is not about keeping someone, but about meeting them as they are, without illusion. If they stay, it is because they choose you in your entirety. If they go, you remain unchanged in your essence. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.